Mr. Smith, let me just come back to something you said, thinking about now workers. You talked about Wendy's, I think it was, automating the drive-through, and talking about this was a good thing. I just want to press on that a little bit. Is it a good thing that workers lose their jobs to AI, whether it's at Wendy's or whether it's at Walmart or whether it's at the local hardware store? I mean, is it? You pointed out that your comment was that there's really no creativity involved in taking orders through the drive-through, but that is a job, oftentimes a first job for younger Americans. But hey, in this economy, where the wages of blue-collar workers have been flat for 30, 40 years and running, what worries me is that oftentimes what we hear from the tech sector, to be honest with you, is that jobs that don't have creativity, as tech defines it, don't have value. I'm frankly scared to death that AI will replace lots of jobs that tech types think aren't creative and will leave even more blue-collar workers without any place to turn. So my question to you is can we expect more of this? And is it really progress for folks to lose those kind of jobs that, I suspect that's not the best paying job in the world, but at least it's a job. And do we really want to see more of these jobs lost?
Well, to be clear, first, I didn't say whether it was a good or bad thing. I was asked to predict what jobs would be impacted and identified that job as one that likely would be. So, but let's, I think, step back, because I think your question is critically important. Let's first reflect on the fact that we've had about 200 years of automation that have impacted jobs, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. In Wisconsin, where I grew up, or in Missouri, where my father grew up, if you go back 150 years, it took 20 people to harvest an acre of wheat or corn, and now it takes one. So 19 people don't work on that acre anymore. And that's been an ongoing part of technology. The real question is this: how do we ensure that technology advances so that we help people get better jobs, get the skills they need for those jobs, and hopefully do it in a way that broadens economic opportunity rather than narrows it? I think the thing we should be the most concerned by is that since the 1990s, and I think this is the point you're making, if you look at the flow of digital technology, fundamentally we've lived in a world that has widened the economic divide. Those people with a college or graduate education have seen their incomes rise in real terms. Those people with, say, a high school diploma or less have seen their income level actually drop compared to where it was in the 1990s. So what do we do now? Well, I'll at least say what I think our goals should be. Can we use this technology to help advance productivity for a much broader range of people, including people who didn't have the good fortune to go to, say, where you or I went to college or law school? And can we do it in a way that not only makes them more productive, but actually reap some of the dividends of that productivity for themselves in a growing income level? I think it's that conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I hope that's what AI can do. You talked about the farm used to take 20 people to do what one person could do. It used to take thousands of people to produce textiles or furniture or other things in this company, where now it's zero. So we can tell the tale in different ways. I'm not sure that seeing working class jobs go overseas or be replaced entirely is a success story. In fact, I'd argue it's not at all. It's not a success story. And I'd argue more broadly that our economic policy the last 30 years has been downright disastrous for working people. And tech companies and financial institutions and certainly banks and Wall Street, they have reaped huge profits. But blue-collar workers can barely find a good-paying job. I don't want AI to be the latest accelerant of that trend. And so I don't really want every service station in America to be manned by some computer such that nobody can get a job anymore, get their foot in the door, start their climb up the ladder. That worries me. Let me ask you about something else here in my expiring time. You mentioned national security, critically important. Of course, there's no national security threat that is more significant for the United States than China. Let me just ask you, is Microsoft too entwined with China? You have the Microsoft Research Asia that was set up way in Beijing back in the late 1990s. You've got centers now in Shanghai and elsewhere. You've got all kinds of cooperation with Chinese state-owned businesses. I'm looking at an article here from Protocol magazine where one of their contributors said that Microsoft had been the alma mater of Chinese big tech. Are you concerned about your degree of entwinement with the Chinese government? Do you need to be decoupling in order to make sure that our national security interests aren't fatally compromised?
I think it's something that we need to be and are focused on. To some degree, in some technology fields, Microsoft is the alma mater of the technology leaders in every country in the world because of the role that we've played over the last 40 years. But when it comes to China today, we are and need to have very specific controls on who uses our technology and for what and how. That's why we don't, for example, do work on quantum computing, or we don't provide facial recognition services, or focus on synthetic media, or a whole variety of things, while at the same time, when Starbucks has stores in China, I think it's good that they can run their services in our data center rather than a Chinese company's data center.
Well, just on facial recognition, I mean, back in 2016, your company released this database, MS Celeb, 10 million faces without the consent of the folks who were in the database. You eventually took it down, although it took 3 years. China used that database to train much of its facial recognition software and technology. I mean, isn't that a problem? You said that Microsoft might be the alma mater of many companies' AI, but China's unique, no? I mean, China is running concentration camps using digital technology like we've never seen before. I mean, isn't that a problem for your company to be in any way involved in that?
We don't want to be involved in that in any way, and I don't believe we are. I think that...
Are you going to close your centers in China, your Microsoft Research Asia in Beijing, or your center in Shanghai?
I don't think that will accomplish what you're asking us.
You're running thousands of people through your centers out into the Chinese government and Chinese state-owned enterprises. Isn't that a problem?
First of all, there's a big premise, and I don't embrace the premise that that is in fact what we're doing.
Which part is wrong?
The notion that we're running thousands of people through and then they're going into the Chinese government.
Is that not right? I thought you had 10,000 employees in China whom you've recruited from Chinese state-owned agencies, Chinese state-owned businesses. They come work for you, and then they go back to these state-owned entities.
We have employees in China. In fact, we have that number. To my knowledge, that is not where they're coming from. That is not where they're going. We are not running that kind of revolving door. And it's all about what we do and who we do it with that I think is of paramount importance. And that's what we're focused on.
You'd condemn what the Chinese government's doing to the Uyghurs in the Xinjiang province and all of that.
We do everything we can to ensure that our technology is not used in any way for that kind of activity in China and around the world, by the way.
But you condemn it, to be clear.
Yes.
What are your safeguards that you have in place such that your technology is not further enabling the Chinese government, given the number of people you employ there and the technology you develop there?
Well, you take something like facial recognition, which is at the heart of your question. We have very tight controls that limit the use of facial recognition in China, including controls that in effect make it very difficult, if not impossible, to use it for any kind of real-time surveillance at all. And by the way, the thing we should remember, the US is a leader in many AI fields. China is the leader in facial recognition technology and the AI for it. And
well, in part because of the information that you helped them acquire, no?
No, it's because they have the world's most data.
Well, yeah, but you gave them 10 million.
I don't think that's
You don't think that had anything to do with it?
I don't think, when you have a country of 1.4 billion people and you decide to have facial recognition used in so many places, it gives that country a mass of data.
But are you saying that the database that Microsoft released in 2016, MS Celeb, you're saying that wasn't used by the Chinese government to train their facial recognition?
I am not familiar with that, and I add it to the list. I'd be happy to provide you with information.
Okay.
But my goodness, the advance in that facial recognition technology. If you go to another country where they're using facial recognition technology, it's highly unlikely it's American technology. It's highly likely that it's Chinese technology because they are such leaders in that field, which I think is fine. I mean, if you want to pick a field where the United States doesn't want to be a technology leader, I'd put facial recognition technology on that list. But let's recognize it's homegrown.
How much money has Microsoft invested in AI development in China?
I don't know, but I will tell you this. The revenue that we make in China, which accounts for what, about 1 out of every 6 humans on this planet, if not, it's 1.5% of our global revenue. It's not the market for us that it is for other industries or even some other tech companies.
Sounds then like you can afford to decouple.
But is that the right thing to do?
Yes. And in a regime that is fundamentally evil, that is inflicting the kind of atrocities on its own citizens that you just alluded to, that is doing to the Uyghurs what it's doing, that is running modern-day concentration camps, yeah, I think it is.
But there's 2 questions that I think at least are worthy of thought. Number 1, do you want General Motors to sell or manufacture cars? Let's just say sell cars in China. Do you want to create jobs for people in Michigan or Missouri so that those cars can be sold in China? If the answer to that is yes, then think about the second question. How do you want General Motors in China to run its operations, and where would you like it to store its data? Would you like it to be in a secure data center run by an American company, or would you like it to be run by a Chinese company? Which will better protect General Motors' trade secrets? I'll argue we should be there, so that we can protect the data of American companies, European companies, Japanese companies. Even if you disagree on everything else, that, I believe, serves this country well.
Yeah, but I think you're doing a lot more than just protecting data in China. You have major research centers, thousands, tens of thousands of employees. And to your question, do I want General Motors to be building cars in China? No, I don't. I want them to be making cars here in the United States with American workers. And do I want American companies to be aiding in any way the Chinese government in their oppressive tactics? I don't. Senator Ossoff, would you like me to yield to you now? Are you ready?
I am going to. I have been very hesitant to interrupt.
Very patient.
The discussion, the conversation here has been very interesting, and I'm going to call on Senator Ossoff, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony.